Tom sat on the beach with the sun sinking towards the horizon and reflected that this was the most peaceful place he had ever been. Here was a small island in the Outer Hebrides, in western Scotland. Tom's wife, Lorraine, had convinced him to move from Edinburgh to where she herself and countless generations of her family had grown up. Tom hoped to see a green flash at sunset. He knew it was an explainable meteorological phenomenon related to the Earth's atmosphere, but as a writer he felt there must be a more romantic interpretation that could be used in writing without stepping too much on the heels of Jules Verne. The island was a long way away, and this was all before the advent of the internet and mass communications. Tom would have enough of the necessary peace and tranquility to continue writing. He had to admit that it was a good move, especially given their intention to have children. Lorraine is right. It's a different pace of life here among the close-knit community. She is glad to be back home and seems to know everyone on the island. Tom felt some coldness from the locals since he was an outsider married to a beautiful girl from the island, but he liked their straightforward manners. It was impressive how amicably everyone took to the task, and he wondered if it all had something to do with the independence necessary for the survival of the small island community. Tom had met Lorraine at university. Both were studying English literature. Lorraine hoped to become a teacher, while Tom focused on creativity and writing. They developed a strong relationship and married shortly after graduation, choosing to live in Edinburgh where there were better job opportunities. Lorraine is a tall and athletically built woman of about 5 feet 80, but on the island her height is not above average. All the locals seem large and some are huge. Tom wondered if there was anything of the Viking heritage that characterized the West Coast islands. Most of the natives have blonde hair, some with red highlights, and Lorraine is no exception. She wears her hair slicked back and ending at the top of her neck. It goes well with her piercing green eyes. In his opinion, she is perfection, although lately he has begun to think that she could look even sexier when she is pregnant. Lorraine had been putting off having children for the past few years, but now she was ready. He had never seen his wife so happy, involved in island life, and constantly involved in one committee or another. She's currently organizing the Solstice Festival. The festival involved the whole island in the weeks leading up to the holiday. The plan was to hold a series of contests and games, gather together on the island in the afternoon, and have a party with music, dancing, and an inordinate amount of whiskey. The competitions included a series of contests very similar to the games of the Highlanders. These were open to all willing men between the ages of 18 and 30, and the winner was proclaimed the inseminator of the season. The series of competitions for children were mini versions of the games for adults. Tom was offered the opportunity to participate in the competitions. He tried to refuse, but the locals insisted. Not wanting to offend anyone, he agreed to give it a try. He performed well in the race, coming in a respectable second place, and could have done better if his calf hadn't cramped up on the rough terrain. Tom was used to running on paths. He spotted a huge fellow walking angrily to the penultimate, though how he had ever managed to finish the race with so much muscle was a mystery to Tom. The next contest was to use a pitchfork to throw a coiled sheaf of straw through a bar that was getting higher and higher. Tom tried it, but could not get over the lowest bar. He politely declined, realizing that all other competitions were based on strength and that he had no chance against the giants of the islanders. This decision proved to be the right one, as the giants also excelled in the next two events: the kettlebell throw over the bar and the rock push, the mountain version of the shot put. Then there was a competition Tom hadn't seen before. It required catching and lifting a calf. He had no idea of the rules, but was amazed at the ease with which the competitors handled the huge animals. This alone confirmed the wisdom of Tom's decision not to participate. In the next challenge, two contestants sat on the grass facing each other, with the soles of their feet pressed together and their hands on a stick. This was purely a strength test. The winner was the one who pulled the opponent off the ground. The final event was the traditional log throw, and he watched as the giant who came second in the race launched the biggest log, which flew up and flipped over, landed on the ground, and won the competition. The competition was very impressive and fiercely contested, but Sean McLeod won all the strength events and the overall title called Inseminator. He is a man-mountain, and his body resembles that of Chris Hemsworth, although he can't match the star's looks, looking generally rounder and darker. When the evening program began, Tom was introduced to Islanders he didn't know, including the McLeod family, and Sean congratulated him on his victory. Tom felt like an outsider again as Lorraine and the McLeods discussed old family ties, so he quietly stepped back for another drink. Tom watched Lorraine from across the bar and thought she looked stunning in her summer dress, which certainly emphasized her full breasts and slender calves. He realized where Lorraine had gotten her looks from. Megan remained a striking woman, more like Lorraine's older sister than her mother. They talked with Sean for a long time before he took a laurel wreath from the stage and placed it on Lorraine's head. Tom approached them, watching with interest, but as he approached, Sean stepped back. "What's up, Lorraine?" He nodded toward her new headdress. "Oh, nothing much. It's an old tradition. The inseminator chooses the queen of the solstice. Our families have known each other for a long time. It's a nice gesture from Sean as a homecoming gift. I can't refuse the offer, but it doesn't really mean anything." Her mom interrupted. "Rubbish, Lorraine. It's still a great honor to be chosen, and very nice since you missed out on such an opportunity while at university." Tom didn't like his wife being chosen by another man. "Do you have any responsibilities as a queen?" "No, nothing special. It's just symbolic. Except that I'll have to walk around with this spiky thing on my head all night." "It actually looks good on you. It frames your gorgeous face." Lorraine thanked him for the compliment, took his hand, and they went back to join the dancing, which seemed to involve people of all ages. They were drawn in. They were drawn in for a while, and after one of the exchanges, Tom found himself dancing with an attractive brunette. A little later, he ran into her at the bar and learned that she was a widow and her name was Morag. They chatted about the island, the festival, and its traditions. She had a warm and accommodating personality and enjoyed telling stories about previous festivals. Tom asked her about the tradition of the Solstice Queen, saying that he understood it was optional. Morag seemed to hesitate, but then continued. "Not really, and nowadays only a few families adhere to the old traditions. In fact, I declined when it was offered to me a few years ago." "Oh, and why was that?" "It just wasn't quite right. My Fraser was in the Scottish Highland Regiment and was posted to Afghanistan, so I turned it down. Families look at it differently. It's just an old tradition for most of us. And when he didn't come home, I was glad I said no." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you." "It's okay. It was years ago, and the pain of remembering him has faded with time." The festival was about the fertility of the land, sort of like a fall festival, but at the beginning of the growing season. As part of it, Megan suggested I take a walk with the local fishermen. Lorraine thought it was a way to integrate with the islanders, saying that if the fishermen accepted me, so would everyone else. I was warned about fishing superstitions and how not to bring bad luck on myself. Not whistling on the boat, not mentioning the word pig, or talking about women were all on the list of prohibitions. We put out to sea and headed for the fishing grounds, dragging bundles of traps that caught lobsters, langoustines, and crabs. The currents were treacherous. I thought the whirlpools were Hollywood fiction, but the ones around the island turned out to be quite real. Skipper Fergus explained that the tides pass quickly through narrow places in the sea bays and over underwater rocks, forming whirlpools. They fish between the tides to make it possible to pull fish out. Seeing the water accumulated in the bottom of the boat, Tom became alarmed, but the skipper took it calmly. "Don't worry, lad. The planks sometimes dry up or separate. The pump will keep us afloat, but we'd better get back to the harbor." Tom was relieved to get on dry land, though Fergus was right. The pump had done the job. He jumped off the boat and quickly made his way to the lot they had converted into a house. As he entered the kitchen, he saw his mother-in-law reading a prayer book, but that wasn't what caught his attention. His attention was drawn to the sounds of sex coming from the bedroom, very loud sex. He rushed past Megan, running up the stairs 2 steps and burst into the bedroom. Lorraine was on all fours, oblivious to her surroundings and making shrill noises while Sean had her. Sean looked at him with disdain. "I'm not done yet." He continued to have her, even harder, and Tom couldn't believe it. But the next statement blew his mind. Finally, Lorraine looked up at Tom madly and, breathing heavily, said, "We'll be done soon, honey." Tom was stunned. This couldn't be true. He was about to turn toward the stairs, but before he knew it, he grabbed what was closest, a framed wedding photo of him and Lorraine, and launched it at Sean, hitting him in the head. "You little bastard!" Sean got off Lorraine and lunged at Tom, pushing him backwards. It was a fight, but not like in the movies. Just two guys pushing each other around. Tom landed a glancing blow to Sean's face, but he didn't seem to feel it at all. A second later, he felt blood spurting from his nose. Sean overpowered him by slamming him into the wall and punching him several times in the ribs with his fist. He heard Lorraine scream, "Don't hit him, Sean!" The next blow hit him in the jaw and he passed out, vaguely aware that Lorraine was trying to pull Sean away from him and feeling blood running from his nose to his throat and his eyes going dark. He woke up in bed with Lorraine sitting beside him with a concerned look. Tom wheezed, "What was that?" "It was awful, Tom. You almost choked." I panicked. "But Mom rolled you over and cleared your throat before we called the doctor. You were knocked out for a few hours. You broke a few ribs and your nose in the fight." Not to say it was a fight, just that he must have kept hitting me. "Everything hurts." "That was very brave, Tom. Sean has a black eye and a concussion. He lost his temper and kept hitting you until we finally managed to stop him." He looked at Lorraine, waiting for an explanation. "This is just insemination." Tom looked puzzled, she said, as if that explained everything. But it didn't explain anything to Tom. Lorraine continued, "I'm sorry you got hurt, kid. It wasn't necessary. It won't affect us. It just ensures that we have strong, healthy children. It ensures that the strongest genes are passed on, the same thing we do with livestock. A strong inseminator ensures pregnancy and is responsible for 70% of the offspring's health." Tom looked even more puzzled. Megan must have heard the voices and entered the room. "Mom, please help me explain everything. Tom doesn't understand." Let's go back a little bit. This is not sex as you understand it, nor is it an affair. It is a centuries-old tradition that has helped the island endure through hard times. Women on the island who want to get pregnant meet the strongest man of the season, the inseminator. Before insemination, we were weak. Disease and infant mortality was shockingly high. Only 1 in 6 children survived to adulthood, and we couldn't afford it due to clan conflicts and invaders. Insemination saved us. It allowed the island to repopulate. Lorraine had done nothing wrong, Tom. Lorraine nodded in agreement. "It is not lovemaking. There is no romance between Sean and me. It is simply insemination as often as possible during the fertile season. He will have other women wanting to get pregnant this season. I'm the first, since he's chosen me to be the queen of the solstice." "Great. So he slept with you more than once?" Lorraine lowered her gaze, her neck reddening. Megan continued on behalf of her daughter in a business-like tone. "You want strong, healthy children, Tom. We didn't always have that here. Many women had miscarriages and many weak children died in infancy, so the strongest gene pool was necessary for survival. Just look at the size and strength of the men on the island. Sean is a prime example, and he has earned the right to reproduce. Maybe it's the steroids that make him so strong. Obviously, he takes them. It could also explain why he lost his temper and kept hitting me. Does it bother you at all that I might get hurt?" Lorraine's eyes widened. "Of course it bothers me. I was so worried. It shouldn't have happened. He was wrong to do that to you." Tom genuinely wondered if the nightmare was all around him. "Nice story to justify his cheating, but now there is no plague and war like before. Antibiotics and immunization have lowered child mortality. You're doing it because you like it. Your behavior confirms it. You couldn't get enough and certainly didn't want to be interrupted." "I couldn't help but get aroused. He was, impressive, and that increases the chances of getting pregnant." "So are the kids going to be mine, or do you want me to mainstream his kids?" "The odds are even, Tom. I'm not ruling you out. It's just that he's got great genetics. You'd still have a chance to be the biological father, and whoever the child was from, it would be ours." "Damn, it's only getting worse. Now you're offering me his leftovers." Megan flared up with anger. "Don't be so vulgar. You're an outsider and can't know how important this is to us. It's present in every lore we learn as we grow up here." "Tell me, Megan, as many times as you have played this role, may I suggest that neither Lorraine nor her 2 sisters are from your husband?" They are all John's children. He is the father. But yes, the seed came from different inseminators. Those can only serve 2 seasons each, and we have 3 strong and beautiful daughters that we are both proud of. So, we're just going to stay together like nothing happened? I'll be fertile for another week, Tom. You can't be serious. Are you going to continue to be in a relationship with him? No, Tom, not after what he did. But we could. You could impregnate me. I just need you to compliment Sean. Go to hell, Lorraine, you're both crazy. The fact that you sent us on a fishing trip confirms that you knew this whole thing was off limits. Don't worry, I'm not coming within 3 feet of you, and I'm not staying here. I'm leaving tonight. For your sake, Tom, we tried to be careful. You can't leave the island. No one's taking you off until we sort this out. There's nowhere else to go. Please stay and let us explain. You've already done that, and your explanations are unacceptable, and now you're holding me against my will and preventing me from getting medical treatment at the hospital. What makes you, Lorraine, a cruel, misguided, heartless cheater and kidnapper? What struck Tom most of all was Lorraine's absolute certainty that such an agreement would have no effect on their relationship. The next day, Tom managed to leave the cottage despite the pain in his ribs and nausea. He walked down to the harbor, and of course none of the fishermen were willing to take him to the mainland or allow him to rent a boat. In refusing, Fergus looked embarrassed, but was sincere when he explained. You can't get there on your own, Tom. The tides and currents are treacherous. We won't go out today anyway. The weather is too rough. Tom didn't argue. The sea was rough. The waves were covered with white lambs, and the thought of having to wade through the waves in a small boat made his body ache. There was nowhere to go. He didn't know who was involved, but no one wanted to shelter him. He headed to the bar, hoping to ease the pain. By the time the last orders were announced there and the place started to close, it seemed to help. There was nowhere to go, so he wandered aimlessly around the island. It was cold, the northern sea breeze blowing through him. Alcohol now seemed like a very bad idea. He sat down to rest and closed his eyes. The second time he woke up in a warm bed, not remembering how he'd gotten there. Lorraine came running in, looking both upset and mad. You almost got hypothermia. You should have let me freeze. Don't ever say that. I love you. You should stay in bed and recover. We were lucky that the owner of the place informed us of your departure, and we all rushed out to look for you. It was several more days before Tom could get up and walk along the rocks. He watched the currents and eddies, imagining Fergus and the others as tiny dots on small boats in a vast sea. He noted the time of low tide and went on his way when someone approached him on the path. Lorraine was waiting for him when he returned, full of concern. Where have you been? Come to the fireplace and warm yourself. Tom was too tired to argue. The walk had exhausted him. Please, Tom, this shouldn't change anything between us. How can you say that? It changes everything. She clung to him. How long are you going to abuse yourself, Tom, if you reject me? I might need Sean again. You'll lose. He won't say no. Come on, it's still me. And... Tom's anger burst through the fatigue. You can't get enough, can you? Then just go and fuck him again. Lorraine sobbed. It's not like that. It was just sex. I still want you and you make me whole. We're still the same. We still have the same wonderful marriage. Were you thinking about our wonderful life together when you slept with him? It's the same marriage that inspired you to get into bed with another man, the same marriage you destroyed, and I still can't understand why you did it. What more do you need, Lorraine? I've suffered a beating and I'm almost freezing. Will only my death finally convince you? Megan found Tom in the kitchen. You know she loves you very much. She's sure you're strong enough as a couple to get through this. Tom replied glumly. Actually, you are both deluded. This is the ultimate betrayal. I naively assumed that my wife would be faithful to me, as she stated in her wedding vows. I understand, Tom, and it must be difficult to explain how differently we look at everything. We don't see it as infidelity. It's actually important to us, and I know Lorraine sees it as a natural way to conceive, like so many other examples in the animal world. We're not animals. Why don't you just be honest, Megan? and admit that this is just a way to mess with your husband. Okay, if you want the harsh truth, we're having a great time. The strongest young stud in our bed is a dream come true. It's a turn-on and they can't get enough of us. We have a better chance of getting pregnant because we're so horny. Tom, you still have that option. Get Lorraine back, take her and impregnate her yourself. She'll always choose you over Sean or anyone else. There's absolutely zero chance of that happening. Lorraine was sure that when the pain subsided, she could get Tom back. She just needed to remind him how good they were together and how they dreamed of children in the future. I haven't been with Sean since the night he beat you up, and I was just trying to make you jealous with my comments. I'll stop and wait to see if I'm pregnant. We still love each other no matter what. We need each other and depend on each other, Tom. I'm right for you, and deep down you know it. Tom looked at her with contempt. It's over, and there's no going back. I can handle it, Lorraine. I won't let you destroy me, and I will build a new life. You do realize that when I leave this fucking island, I'm going to come back with the police. What you're doing has to be breaking some kind of law, kidnapping, imprisonment, something. Lorraine went to her mother. Jesus, Mom, this is a disaster. I wanted this to be a miraculous conception, the most important event of my life. And now it's ruined. Maybe you're right. I should have kept Sean as a secret lover, but that's what happens when you marry a stranger and then get carried away with insemination. Lorraine remembered what a wonderful day she'd had with Tom and was about to give up on the idea. But then seeing how impressive Sean was at the competition and the fact that he'd made her queen made her change her mind. The sex had been amazing. She could only blame herself. Letting Sean take her a third time had increased the risk of Tom coming home, but she couldn't resist. Megan was unfazed. He's in shock now. Let him get used to the idea. It might be worth keeping Sean away for a while. Poking his nose in it will only make things worse. Good thing you haven't done the second and third insemination yet. Yeah, but that's not going to happen now. This whole thing needs to stop. It's completely out of control. He's even talking about involving the police. Megan was horrified. Lorraine is right. There is no turning back, and the police are not an option. Perhaps we should have Tom have an accident on the cliffside path. Lorraine would be upset, but Sean would eventually calm her down. He's always had a thing for her, and Megan is sure he was purposely stalling on Lorraine to get caught. The truth is that Lorraine will be happier with an islander. The next day, Tom wandered around the island and watched the fishermen again. He kept walking, trying to clear his head, but the beauty of the early evening light did little to improve his mood. Looping towards the village, he spotted Morag sitting on a bench overlooking the sea. She looked nervous, but as he approached, she seemed to make up her mind and stood up. Her nervous look was replaced by compassion. My God, Tom, look at your face. I can't believe he did that to you. How are you? It's best described by the word numb. I have no idea how I feel. It's like living in a nightmare that you know can't be true, and sooner or later you wake up. Does everyone on the island know what's going on? No, only a few families carry on the tradition. Most believe it stopped years ago. Rumor has it that you and Sean had a falling out over him declaring Lorraine queen. Megan asked the fishermen not to take you back to give you time to bond with Lorraine. Well, yes, the weather has improved, and if I explain the truth to them, they might be willing to move me back to the mainland. I'm sorry, Tom, but it could be worse than you think. There's something I need to tell you. Morag leaned back against the back of the bench. The inseminator for the last 2 years was a young man called Jonathan Stewart. He wasn't allowed to compete again, and he settled with his girlfriend anyway. Sean was always second, and everyone knew Sean would win this year. He and Lorraine have a history. Before she left for college, they dated. No wonder he picked her to be queen. Hell, she's been putting off having kids for the last couple years. Sounds like it was all planned, that bitch. I told her it was over, and I'd go to the police as soon as I got off the island. They can't keep me captive here forever. Morag looked anxiously at Tom. Look, Tom, I wouldn't stay here too long. I don't know what Megan is capable of. She's a bigot, and that seems to have passed on to Lorraine. Sean and a few others will do whatever she suggests. The fact that you threatened the police might make them do something really stupid. Lorraine rushed to tell Tom the happy news. She was pregnant. She wouldn't have to go to bed with Sean anymore. They could finally put everything behind them and get on with raising their children. Tom couldn't be found, and a small rowing skiff went missing. Someone mentioned that Tom had been watching the tides and fishing off the rocks. The fishermen went out to sea but found nothing. The chances of Tom reaching the mainland were slim to none. Lorraine was out of her mind. She had done this to him. She might as well have just killed him. Megan felt relieved that at least she didn't have to deal with the situation herself. 5 days had passed when a skiff had been found on the north shore of the island, its overturned wreck. At this news, Lorraine's fragile state of mind was shaken, and she lashed out at her mother, inflicting considerable damage until she was dragged away. She was still screaming at her mother, "It's your fault! You killed him! You killed my wonderful husband!" Her rage continued until a doctor administered a sedative. Lorraine's attack left Megan with deep scratches on her face, bruises, pulled hair, and a bleeding scalp. Lorraine aside, things on the island returned to normal. A week later, Morag left for her sister's island, glad of the chance to escape the powder keg atmosphere. Megan was sitting in the harbor trying to think of the best way to support Lorraine when she heard the faint sound of an engine. A Coast Guard cutter was approaching, entering the small harbor, and then she saw their A group of police officers. As expected, the policemen found Tom at Morag's house. Lorraine couldn't believe that all this time he had been on the island when she thought he was dead. She tried to shout to him to tell him she was pregnant, but the police officers held her back as she sobbed hysterically and started pulling her hair. Possible charges were unclear, with Sean claiming the attack was in self-defense. "He attacked me first, and there are witnesses." "Indeed there are, and one of the witnesses claims that you continued to strike him after he lost consciousness." "No, it was all a blur. I'm sure it wasn't me." "And you're 20 centimeters taller and 36 kilograms heavier than him. In a boxing match or a fair fight, you definitely wouldn't have been put in the same weight class." Sean was arrested for grievous bodily harm. If he goes to jail, the sentence would be 3 to 16 years. Lorraine's testimony about violently assaulting an unconscious man suggested a significant sentence. Tom moved freely around the island, so there was no clear enough justification for false imprisonment or kidnapping. The locals simply stated that they were prevented from entering the harbor by bad weather. Megan realized they had nothing. The whole thing was pretty embarrassing, but they couldn't prove anything. Then the stories and rumors started coming out, and the fact that Megan had implicated others and lied to them caused a lot of hard feelings. She was distraught when she was offered the chance to leave the island for good. There was little choice. Life on the island without the support of those around her would prove impossible. After her departure, she was never heard from again. Lorraine also left the island to be evaluated in a psychiatric clinic. She died in childbirth, partly due to an inherited weakness, possibly related to a limited gene pool, and exacerbated by her unstable mental state. The baby, a robust girl weighing 3 kilograms 800 grams, survived. A DNA test revealed that the child's father is Tom. This means that Lorraine must have been pregnant before she was inseminated by Sean, since she and Tom have not been intimate since. The irony of the whole episode being meaningless summed up the futility of it all for Tom. Tom and his perfectly healthy daughter never returned to the island, but they were joined by their savior, Morag. A year later, Morag and Tom were quietly married, and a sister and brother were added to their growing family. They were vacationing in the Caribbean when Tom finally saw a green flash at sunset. Perhaps Jules Verne is right. It is a signal that everything in life has worked out in the most perfect way and has led to a happiness that is sure to be complete.